level, and people will view our schools from the outside and say they're doing something different, they're doing something special. So let's get started. There's no decision in any school that you or I make that's a small one. It's pretty overwhelming, at least from where I sit. And there have been a lot of things that Bill and Terry and Perry have done to help us meet some of the kinds of things that you see on the screen right now. The funding academies, polls, district conferences, webinars, policy-based governance decisions are changing the way we do things here at our Redeemer. And I think that the things we're going to share with you this morning will highlight at least 7 of the areas that you see listed here. As I sat down to think about what the biggest decisions are that we make in Lutheran schools, I can tell you that I couldn't fit them all on this page. But we are at the very least in a situation where we're trying to posture ourselves, and I know you are too, for a future where these decisions are going to absolutely magnify themselves. So the smallest decision can have the biggest impact, and 7 areas that are impacted here, as I see them, will be academic standards, relationships, finances, professional development, policies, curriculum, and probably some spillover into marketing as well. Ultimately, everything we do is about the people that we serve. Unlike some of the webinars you've had, which I found absolutely intriguing, that talk about, in some cases, expense and the inability that some of our smaller schools and even our larger ones have to maybe move as fast as we wish we could into that area, especially regarding technology, marketing, and all the many things we wish we could do. The things we're going to talk to you this morning are not, or talk to you about this morning, are not really expensive. They're going to be ideas that are paper, not so much as people, but rather people over paper. There's really a plan that we'll share with you that involves patience and patterning, planning and persistence, and I should add in here in major caps, a lot of prayer. Everything that we do in our schools truly does begin with us, and I would encourage you, and certainly in the future, welcome any conversation you'd like to have about any of the things that we've been presenting this morning. It's a grassroots movement. It starts with us. And so, as Bob Rogalski often says, it's case time. Time to copy and steal absolutely everything that you think can make you feel better. So we talk about intentionality. What we say and how we say it are both very, very important. However, the timing that we apply to what we say and what we say we're going to do is going to be what would make all the difference. It's about premeditation. In my world, it's about taking incrementally small steps in the right direction. We found at our Redeemer that one thing that really helps us is forming our entire school year around a theme. This year it happens to be Saved by Grace, Sent to Serve. In years past, we've had themes that have talked about growing, about patience, and any number of topics which we've woven into everything that we did with our teachers as we work on becoming a lot better. So the theme for the year, beginning with an introduction at the beginning of the year, can be very, very helpful to set the tone for what it is you're going to do. If you read the article that's posted on the portal, we talked about excellence by design, and we really addressed 6 different topics. The ones that you see on the bottom half of the screen, they spell the word sign, are the ones that we're really going to talk about this morning. They regard team health, student-led conferencing, 2+2 mentoring, and data trends. And Jim and I will kind of be taking turns going back and forth. The one I would just institute here thought, the one that's executing vision is super important, and I don't think anyone here would disagree with that. The important thing that I would want you to know is Jim Pingle from Sheboygan Lutheran does a super good job on executing vision, and he may be a guy you'd want to get a hold of. He's got a PowerPoint he can share, and it is phenomenal. I wouldn't even try to top what he does. So instead, we turn ourselves to those 4 SIGNs and see if we can address those one at a time. So the question becomes, who cares? Well, we know school boards care. We know that administrators care. That's what we're paid to do, and it's what we do because we love the Lord Jesus. It's definitely important that teachers care, And I'm going to guess that your school is blessed like ours is, with many excellent teachers who care greatly about delivering the best possible instructions. We know that parents care. If we don't believe that, especially at this time of year, we start getting all kinds of phone calls about report cards and test scores and eligibility for sports and high school decisions, and the list of concerns they have are endless. But ultimately, and some days it's hard to believe, our students care as well. So we take a look at those groups, and we have to ask the question that good middle school teachers try to answer every day: why do I need to care? The answer to that question is going to be the secret to improved staff development, because when you've hooked them and they start caring and asking, how do we move this forward? How do I take this to another level? You know you've gotten somewhere. It's important to over-communicate change, feather it in carefully, and check and constantly dipstick for success. The bottom line question that Jim and I look at each other and ask literally almost every day is the question that's on your screen. It's a question of conscience. Are we moving in the right direction? Are we better today as we look a year ago, as we look a month ago, as we even look at yesterday? Sometimes the yesterday increment can be very difficult to gauge. But then again, if you've touched one life by anything that you've done differently or by what you've said, we know that we've been successful. I think the bottom line is transparency. And if teachers have to ask, where did that come from? You haven't laid the foundation well enough. I've made that mistake a time or two, and I've gone now to literally sharing my goals for the school year at the beginning of every single staff in-service that we do, because I can't ask them to set goals if they aren't clear on what mine are as well. So you're here today because you don't have to go it alone. I thank God for all the people in my life who have done such an excellent job of getting me to where I am, recognizing that I would be absolutely dead in the water if I was to do it myself. God gives us strength for the day. Sometimes it feels though like we look down the corridor and we just wonder where tomorrow's strength is going to come from. So many hands make lighter work, and it's really important that we try to get everybody in every way on the same page. It's not always possible, but it's a goal at our Redeemer that we have every single day. You see 3 important points there. Everyone is better than anyone is alone. That's not just your new teacher starting her very first year in your classroom. It's not just your teacher who feels like it's maybe time to retire. They look at the things that are going on ahead and ask, can I really do this? It's coming alongside each and every one of the individuals in our schools asking, how can I help you? Because we're definitely better together. Terry taught me something long ago, and I would be really distraught to not get this point across. We're all here to make everybody look better. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jim, who's going to take some time to talk, first of all, about 2+2 conferencing.
One of the things we talk about here often is the idea that iron sharpens iron, that one man sharpens the countenance of another man, that we're always better together than we are alone. And one of the ideas that we came up with was this idea of feedback. Wherever I've gone, people have kind of asked for more feedback. I'm not sure they always like it when they get it, but people ask for more feedback. In the number of schools I've been in, people talk about the fact that they don't necessarily get feedback from the people who really know what's going on. So when I was doing my master's work, I came across this idea of 2+2 feedback for professional growth. And the basic idea is that one teacher visits another classroom. They spend maybe 15, 20 minutes, maybe 45 minutes if they've got the time in there, and kind of get a snapshot of what's going on. The idea here is to take collaboration to the next level, that 2 together are better than 1 alone, that who knows what teaching is better than another teacher, especially one who teaches at the same level. So one teacher goes and visits another, we get a snapshot of what's going on, and feedback then is given. Now this is a scary thing for a lot of people, because giving the feedback becomes a difficult thing. It's easy to tell people what they do well. It's not so easy always to tell people what they don't do well. In 2+2, we have teachers who are told they have to share not only 2 good things, but also 2 ways that they can improve. So you'll actually see down on the right side of your screen some ideas, the 2+2 documents there, which kind of go through the ideas of what the goals are here of 2+2 feedback and how it's done, as well as the forms that go along with that. A lot of us spend a lot of money on staff development when quite often in our own buildings we have the experts that we can use, and 2+2 is designed for that. The basic idea then is you go into a classroom, you spend some time there, you watch another teacher teach, and then you get together later on and you meet about it. That feedback then is designed to be confidential. This is not something that's necessarily shared with the administrator. This is something that's given just between the two. And we stress that this is something that we hope that they look forward to. So goals of 2+2 feedback then include the idea that we embrace the giving and receiving of feedback, that we look for personal and professional development as a part of this. One thing that it's really done for us is kind of improved our connectedness. What I mean by that is not only do we encourage people to get into classrooms of similar ages, but we also encourage people to get into classrooms of other ages. I teach 7th and 8th grade, and I can tell you it scares me to death to think about going into a kindergarten or 1st grade classroom. Yet, when I go in there and watch what happens, I'm just amazed, and it helps me to grow as well. So we improve our connectedness. And obviously then, as we watch other people, I don't know about you, but for me, every time I go and watch somebody else teach, I ask myself, why have I not been doing this all along? So I go in and I learn some different techniques, some different things I can do to reach hopefully new heights of teacher effectiveness. A key to this is it's supposed to be non-threatening. Because you have to have 2 suggestions for improvement, the other person expects to see these. Often what happens is that another teacher asks a teacher to come in and observe them. I've used this myself where I'm struggling with reaching a certain student. I know another teacher has done that well. So I'll ask that teacher to come into my classroom and simply watch what I do and give me some suggestions of how to respond to that particular student. Our hope is that not only are we improving connectedness, but obviously we're pushing each other to become better as we go on. So how does it work? In action, basically what happens is a teacher makes an appointment with another teacher. Oftentimes what will happen is either Mary or I will make ourselves available so that we can go in and watch a class, read a story, take a recess, one of those types of things, so that we can free up our teachers. They make an appointment with another teacher and they say, okay, what is it I'm looking for today? What is it that you would like me to see today? Is there a specific student you'd like me to watch? What are our objectives? As the observation goes on, we have a form for them to fill out. Again, that's available in those documents down on your right side. And they fill out that form. And probably the most important part of this happens usually after school, and that's a post-observation discussion. What is it you saw? What did you think? Can you clarify that for me a little bit? Do you have ideas of how to reach this particular student? Finally, they file a report with me. We require that they do at least one of these observations each semester. We're going to try something new this year. On an in-service day, we're actually going to go to different schools and see how they do things at different schools and fill out these 2+2s. But that report that comes to me is simply, who did you watch? What were some of the hurdles that you had to overcome to do this? And what is it that you would like to see happen in the future to make this easier for you? Hurdles for you implementing this in your building, and we've struggled with these and we continue to struggle with these. The number one thing is really freeing up teachers. How is it that we can give a teacher half an hour, 45 minutes out of their day to do this? We've accomplished it several ways. Here at Our Redeemer, we're blessed to have a physical education specialist and a Spanish teacher, as well as music specialists. So oftentimes teachers will use their free time to do that. However, we'd like to preserve that for them as much as possible. So we have been known, either Mary or myself have been known to step into a classroom. Again, for me, stepping into that kindergarten classroom is scary, but if they give me a story to read, that works for me. So you have to free up your teachers. The second is buy-in. Do the teachers see this as important? Is this something that they're hoping to improve from? Or is this just one more thing to do? At the beginning, it's one more thing to do, to be honest. Hopefully by now, many of them see the improvements that they can make in this. Just the other day, I had our physical education teacher ask me to come in and do some 2+2 with him as he's struggling with a particular student. So we're starting to get the buy-in here. The last thing is trust. And that's kind of an issue of, will you really respect my confidence? Can I really say what I think? Will this get back to the administration somehow? Is somewhat scary to some. And the other idea is the trust the other way as well. Can I really criticize you? Can I really suggest improvements without hurting your feelings? We hope that because it's a requirement, that takes some of the scariness away from that. Now, while all this is designed to be confidential, what we're finding is that some teachers use it as they go through their professional development program. That's a requirement here in Wisconsin for all of our new teachers, and this fits really well into their PDP plan. We also find that a lot of teachers use this in their professional portfolios, and that development of the professional portfolio is something that Mary's actually going to take on next. Do we have any questions at this point regarding 2+2 or anything we've said so far?
Okay, we're going to move into professional portfolios, and I'm going to share some things with you in regard to what we do here at our Redeemer. I would certainly want to mention that this is not necessarily the best way to do it or even the only way to do it. It's what happens to work in our building for us. This began, I would say, about 14 years ago, prior to Terry's leaving our Redeemer. We started talking about portfolios. It had kind of emerged out of the portfolio craze that was going on at the colleges when our student teachers were starting to show up with their own portfolios. And we sort of sat back and asked ourselves the question, is there a way that we could adapt this to our building and make it something that would help our teachers raise themselves to a new level, to self-assess, to examine the quality of their work as seen through the eyes of others, and to allow our teachers to really commit to the beliefs they had about education. In Lutheran schools, I believe we're very good about talking about the spiritual side of a teacher's development, praising them when we see them putting an arm around a child or ministering to a family. In our own school family, in the past month, we've had a death of a 5th grade father. I am forever amazed at the things that teachers think of and the way that they minister to our families. But when it comes to a professional growth development plan of academic improvement, if our teachers were to receive a report card, how would it look? Could we say they were improving in those areas? And have we aided them in every way possible to be intentional about that? So we started saying maybe we should put together a portfolio. It could be a 3-ring binder. It could be a divided folder, something like a accordion folder. It could be put into a file folder that would simply have pockets. That vehicle, whatever they would choose to organize, whatever manner they would choose to do that, was totally within the realm of their decision making. Everybody has a different framework in their mind of who they are, how they look, and how they'd like to represent themselves. And to this day, we don't insist on a 3-ring binder. There are lots of different looks for portfolios that come to me. Sometimes it's even a real expression of the teacher's own personality. I have one that uses wild, crazy dots on everything. Everything is color-coded. It is a science. I'm not that gal. I'm good with the old 3-ring binder and possibly putting some file tabs in. So it's interesting even to see their personalities expressed. But when we do this, what we're hoping to do is establish some goals for the future, to communicate the reasons that we're asking them to do this, primarily so that today we go back to that question of, am I better today than I was a year ago? And then we can ask sometimes the question of them or with them, how might I do things differently? I should mention that in the beginning of this process, this is a compilation. So for the first year, wisely, we said, just take a file folder, stick it in your desk drawer. We'll give you the different areas, and I'll be sharing with those for you in just a minute, that we'd like you to cover in your professional portfolio. Just start gathering. Just kind of hoard those things that you think would fit well into this portfolio that you're going to develop. So communicating the reasons, that's huge. Asking them what can be done differently is important. Re-promise the reward. You will see that this is going to help you move professionally in a positive direction. And always encourage a second try. I checked with these and dipsticked with these at semester. How you doing? How fat is your folder? How well have you remembered to keep things, even down to things that would include something like a student's work as part of your portfolio to show what you're doing in the classroom. There are a lot of startup challenges with this, as you can imagine, and teachers had all kinds of different reactions to it. One was, this looks like hard work. Oh man, this is just one more thing that I have to do. I wish Terry and Mary would just back off. And I think Terry would agree. In some cases, we heard that. It's important, too, to keep in mind that any change is going to be kind of scary, and it's going to be really something to kind of be patient with that first year. So pace the process. Think about maybe saying, let's say by the end of the first quarter, we'd like you to have your lesson or your unit plan in place. They will expect what you inspect. Probably the biggest obsession was knowing exactly how we wanted this done, what we wanted it to look like, and what we wanted it to include. And I can't tell you the number of sheets that I ran off, just reminding them, highlighting occasionally, this is kind of where you should be incrementally about now. It's important to, as Terry says, raise the bar for professionalism. And that happens through the use of the portfolio. Teacher mindset is a little bit of this. For some of your teachers, this is kind of exciting. It's a paper about me. It's just a research paper on me. It's not going and doing an Eric search the way I used to have to when I was going through my master's degree, or Googling anything. None of those things are really going to be all that difficult to achieve. And then finally, it's going to be important that when they've done this work, you can make the feedback real so that they benefit from what's happening. We have not done digital portfolios yet, Kevin. We have talked about moving to that. I will tell you that with all of the technology that teachers are expected to kind of be coming up to speed on, it's important to know that I would be happy to accept that from teachers, but some of the things real life would still need to be scanned in there. For example, we used to ask for, and it's not going to be included in the contents you see, but we used to ask for a recorded lesson. That became extremely artificial, and it was the kind of the rock around most people's necks. It was the thing they left to last, the thing they hated to do. And we finally had to say, you know what? Maybe we were a little off base on that. That, I want to tell you, scored huge points, because people realized that we were willing to change the process to make it something that would benefit them the most. So what's expected in the portfolio? Let's maybe start with that, and if you want to stop me dead and ask any questions about it as we go through it, feel free to do that. Many, many years ago, each of our teachers were asked to write a mission statement, what it was they wanted to accomplish as a teacher in that classroom for the year. They did a very good job, but almost everything they wrote was spiritual once again. And we said, are you reflecting the academic excellence you expect of your students? So some were sent back to the drawing board on that. Eventually, all the mission statements were placed on their doors in the clear see-through type panel, and it was quite evident quickly that parents really liked to know what teachers stood for. The teachers are now asked to sit down and write a philosophy of Christian education. It may include what moved them to be part of the education field in the first place, but more importantly, what they believe they can accomplish with their students throughout the year. They also were asked to create a statement describing their personal relationship with Jesus Christ, and heartwarming it is to read the ways that they recognize they have been used by the Holy Spirit to touch the lives of others. So that becomes a very personal pronoun type little essay that they write. And what I've noted the most in doing this for a number of years now is teachers are constantly updating that. Some will add another one behind it. Some, on the other hand, will simply say, you know what, I've got a better example of what I expect to have happen. The third thing they need is a resume. Now, at this point, I had one teacher turn around and look at me and say, "It seems I'll be perfectly postured to leave. Are you trying to get rid of me?" We smiled, we laughed, and we said, "Absolutely not. You're going nowhere." But look at yourself under those categories. Take a look at what you thought you were about as a beginning teacher, and now that you've been into this for a number of years, how is that working for you? For marginal teachers, this is a little scary because they're sharing something of themselves, and they really have to take a look and see how much they have improved. What courses have they taken? What new things have they personally implemented in our building? What are they willing to take credit for? And I think everyone in the room would agree it's tough to be a great teacher and Lutheran sometimes, because the humility that so many people I know possess kind of flies in the face of this, because you're really asked to flaunt your best stuff. And that's hard for many of our teachers. The next thing they're asked to share is a list of professional goals. And just in this last year, I've actually moved from a list of professional goals constructed to an actual vision statement for their classroom for the year, a preferred future that they would have with their students and themselves, how their classroom will look, how their instruction will look, how they will be better than they were last month and last year. That was all based, by the way, off of that piece that Jim Pingle does on vision statements. Absolutely amazing. A unit plan was developed by them and used in the classroom. It includes the resources that they use to construct the plan. Many of them, as you might well imagine, are now becoming smart boards, websites, things that they're going to be doing as they beef up their instruction based on all the technology that's available to them. And then lastly, they're asked to include samples of their students' work. So show us what the end product was when a student worked with you. And here, more and more and more digital photography is fantastic, of course, because they're clicking their pictures with their cell phones. I used to get the hard paper. Now many will convert those, have them printed through Snapfish, and they'll include them right in their portfolio. So there's a visual site, which is a great thing for you to have as a way to basically demonstrate that it has indeed worked. You also don't have to rip the work away from students. The work in a portfolio doesn't look as nice if it has to be Xeroxed. And so we would often ask our students, would you mind if I kept this piece? And if you take pictures of it, that's of course not necessary. The demonstration of how you share your evaluation with students takes a lot of different aspects. This became kind of a push-pull approach on my part with our teachers, because you can push them toward this goal, but you also have to ask them to share what they're doing, and sometimes it helps me pulling them up over the top of that wall that they're climbing. So I was constantly making suggestions. Well, why don't you put this in? We're not just talking report cards. We're not just talking notes home. Sometimes it can be the communications that you wrote on children's papers. It could be the mid-quarter. Lots of different ways they choose to communicate with parents. Their newsletters, their websites. Many times I have to go on to the website to see some of the things that they've been sharing. So sample written communications, a written demonstration of how they've shared their faith, and the long-range personal and professional goals, all of those extremely important. The third thing, or the third part of this, is now looking professionally, what are others saying about me? And how am I beefing up from the outside the resources that I rely on? So there's generally a list of professional organizations to which they belong. There are letters of recommendation. This is a sticky wicket. Some teachers don't like to do that. I say you have tons of raving fans out there. Simply find a few of them and ask them if they would write for you a letter of recommendation. Please assure them you are not going anywhere. That is not what this is all about. And it's been interesting to see how excited parents are to write for teachers. Some teachers have written for one another. And I would go back to what Jim was talking about, the 2+2 mentoring. Some have included the nice things that teachers have said about them as they watched in their 2+2 observation. So the formal evaluations that they've received, those are something you and I are providing for them. So that's kind of the way the basic premise looks. You have to do this as an introduction, I would say, with a little bit of force, because we know force meets resistance. But if you become their mentor, you're going to get an average performance. If you become their coach, of course, things are going to become more above average. The importance of feedback can never be overestimated. Check with them. What are their questions? And at the beginning of the year, for a brand new teacher, new to our building, not necessarily new to the profession, I simply say, when we meet at the end of the school year, I want you to show me the things that you've compiled in your file folder. That'll be a great start. And from there, I'll work with you to help develop this into a portfolio. And that'll take another year, and that's okay. What we know, a great book, if you have not read it, it's called No Teacher Left Behind by Brian Feese, F-E-E-S-E. Brian Feese, No Teacher Left Behind. He says people treated responsibly will take on responsibility. And I think that that is huge. So, any questions on this section before Jim moves into student-led conferencing? Kevin, no, they don't complete each part of the portfolio in 1 year. I would say that for anyone to get where we really want them to be, it's going to take at least 2, and sometimes you're feathering it into 3 if some of the parts have been weak that you've originally asked them to compile. It's really, really important to remember that they don't have to Google anything. They're not looking for quotations necessarily. It's a research paper on them. And it's important to clarify too, if these are new grads, the portfolio that our grads maybe arrive at our Redeemer with from Concordia is not this portfolio. That was then, this is now, this is the beginning of your professional life, and you're going to pretty much start from here. It can seem a little bit threatening and somewhat artificial initially, but you're going to find that as people coalesce, it's not so difficult. On the corner of the resources, I've shared both the goals which teachers are given, the suggested contents, and I have a rubric for which I assess these. Basically, it's very, very lightweight. They deliver them to me with our end meeting time at the end of the year. I get it back to them, I promise, within a week. And there I tell them what I noticed, what I really, really enjoyed, what I learned about them, and a suggestion or two that I may have to make to increase or improve it. We're now at a point where in our cycle, we've been doing this so long, teachers only turn this in every 2 years. So Kevin, there again, lots of time to make the fixes. For many of them, it's a summer program or maybe something they do on vacation. Any other questions? If not, we're going to turn it back over to Jim.
I have to say that as I've gone through the portfolio process, it's been painful at times. It's been difficult at times because you have to ask yourself some difficult questions, and you have to be honest, and sometimes it's difficult to be honest, especially if you're trying to say good things about yourself. Question was asked, do you try to get buy-in for the 2+2 in the portfolio before you hire a teacher? Is that an important consideration during a hiring process? We talk about it some in the whole interview process, that if they're going to be a part of our Redeemer, that one of the things that they're going to realize very quickly is that this is a collaborative environment, that there are going to be some expectations that are made of them. I know that in some of the interviews that I've been involved in, we've specifically talked about the portfolios that teachers have brought in and said, this is great, this is a good start. Hold on to this thing because you'll be continuing and you'll be gleaning some things from that.
I think it's important too to keep in mind that if you frame it in such a way that these are ways we are supportive of you, it won't be just the principal breathing down your neck, but rather some of your colleagues will be willing to come in and give you some great ideas, and they're dying to hear what they can learn from you as well. So it becomes more of a supportive environment. On the portfolio, the college grads are the easiest ones to hook because they've already done it. They know it's not that difficult. Maybe the rules have changed a bit, but they've been through the process. It's hiring a teacher who has had tons of experience and now telling them, oh, by the way, this is something we do. And there I'm totally on board. We don't want this to be an oh, by the way. It's something that we do share in terms of professional expectations going in. Else there? I certainly do, Kevin. Ask Terry about it, and it's evolving all the time. In summer, I have a list of June things to do, and one of the first things I do is update my resume, because when you get involved in so many projects, you tend to forget all the things you're doing. And I actually have always used my portfolio as the sample for any teacher whom I hire, because heaven knows we shouldn't expect from anyone else what we aren't willing to do ourselves. So that's a great question. And the accountability there, I appreciate that on your part. Maybe if you're listening out there, the place you have to start is taking this step yourself. One thing we find ultimately is inevitably people will say, that wasn't so bad. And that's always kind of reinforcing for Jim and myself. Let me give you just a little history on student-led conferencing, and then Jim's going to take this away. In 1994, I was doing a graduate project, and I came to Terry Schmidt and I said, you know, this whole business of student-led conferences, which was way new back then, was really, really interesting to me. I mean, extremely. Thought of being able to work with a student and their parent to reach a higher level of effectiveness was huge in my book. As I did the research, there were 4 things that popped up, and you see them on the screen there. It becomes a method of accountability. There's great communication. You may think of it as a 3-legged stool. Particularly at that time, I was teaching middle school, and mom and dad and I can discuss the student and what we wish he would do or she would do to death. Bottom line ultimately is, unless they're having the buy-in, your stool only has 2 legs and it's going to be pretty tippy. So communication was huge. For every student, I don't care if they're an A++ student, the idea of organizing themselves and presenting themselves was big. And that was probably the scariest part. Kids would literally come in with clammy hands those first couple of years. And then finally goal setting. And Jim's going to talk about those more specifically. But please know that when you start this, the way we did it as history goes is we started in 3 grades. Terry wisely asked for some pioneers, people who are willing to step out in faith and try something new for a year, not knowing whether it would be a flash in the pan or whether it would really be something that we could build. So teachers from 2nd, 5th, and 8th grade jumped on board and tried the student-led conferencing thing. Terry did a great job of fronting it in newsletters, explaining why we wanted to try it, and from there, those teachers literally took it away.
And Mary talked a little bit about begging, borrowing, and stealing from other people, and I have to confess that I'm one of those who begged, borrowed, and stole this whole idea of student-led conferences. When I was teaching in Ann Arbor, Michigan, I had heard about this idea. My brother-in-law actually taught at this school at that point, and he shared a little bit about it. I went to a couple of different workshops on the idea and implemented things there. So when I came here, it was a nice flow for me, a nice segue into a new place. And having done it now for a number of years, I don't know that I would want to do it anyway. Now, that's not to say that this fits everybody exactly equally. There's different ages of kids in your schools. There's different stages of kids in your schools. We start this process in 2nd grade, and parent shows up with the child on that day. Usually both parents show up with the child on that day, and they sit down together with the teacher. Lower grades, they are led by the students, but the teacher is obviously there to provide a guide to help them get over those rough spots. They're very scripted at the lower grades. We're trying to teach them the process. How is it that you go about doing this? How do we lead a conference? Because that's really what this is a conference. So they're very prescribed, very scripted. Students begin with prayer, one that they have worked on together with their teacher, and their teachers have to spend quite a bit of time working through this. But one of the questions that we ask ourselves continually as we focus on students is, how do we prepare students for the real world? I have a son who is now at Milwaukee Lutheran High School, and he now is building portfolios. We also say that we're not afraid to do whatever we're going to do first, whatever we ask our kids to do. And one of the components for this, as we begin to get into grades 5, 6, 7, 8, is the building of a portfolio. My son at Milwaukee Lutheran has talked about the fact that he has to build a portfolio there, but he kind of knows how to do that already because he had to do it here. So at the junior high level, this becomes a focus more on a portfolio. Now, this is not an abdication of responsibility from the teacher. In fact, in ways, it takes a little bit more responsibility. It becomes interesting to watch the dynamics of the family work as you're sitting there together with the student and the teacher. The higher grade levels, we provide some direction. We provide a suggested list of things that need to be there and other things that they might include. We suggest a specific order, but this is really the student's show. The students hear what the teacher has to say as they're sitting there. This provides some alleviation of some fear. I remember being at home as my parents were in conference with my teachers, worrying about what the teachers were going to say. Well, these students know exactly what the teachers said. So as we go into this, we look at building a portfolio. We make sure that the students get the credit and take ownership for their work, both the positive and the negative. We look at setting goals. We focus on the improvements that can be made in the next quarter. One of the weaknesses that I personally have is going back to those goals. It's been one of my goals this year to go back to those goals and ask the kids, kind of dipstick, how are we doing on this whole thing? One of the byproducts of this is that as the teachers, students, and parents hear those same things, they can discuss those, they can clarify. At the junior high level especially, I've noticed that the parents and kids have open lines of communications that may not be there otherwise. Parents can see that the students can talk about themselves. I've had parents leave and say, I didn't realize that he really thought about what he did at school. We don't hear it at home, so we hear it there.
One of the forms that I used when I was an 8th grade teacher had boxes. Across the top, it was emotional, physical, academic, and social. 5 of them, spiritual was also on there. And then down the side, it said what I'm doing well, what I hope I can do better, and what I hope my parent will notice. Probably the seminal moment for me had to be the day that I had a very low achieving student with very low motivation meet with myself and his dad. And Dad had never been at a conference before, so the whole idea for him was really scary. Then the fact that his son could be in charge when he thought his son's entire performance was subpar in the first place was kind of interesting. But one amazing thing that came out of that conference, James had a number of papers and tests that he was sharing, and they weren't very good. Finally, his father stopped him and said, James, could we just cut to the quick here? Do you have anything good in that stack? James looked at his dad, held up his hand, and said, Dad, hang with me. I'm going to get there. And I think the dad kind of questioned that thought. Well, James went on to share that grid that I just talked to you about. And one thing that he told his dad when it came to how can my parents help me was, Dad, I think you need to take the TV out of my room, because as I thought about all of this, that's my downfall. I about fell over. I thank goodness didn't have to pick Dad off his chair. He was a pretty big guy. But what ended up happening from that was that the following Monday, I got a letter from Dad, and it said, in effect, Dear Mrs. Irish, please don't check this for English grammar because I know you're the English teacher, but I want to tell you that was the most amazing moment I've ever. Happy to know we did remove the TV, and that boy soared from that point on. I wouldn't have even known that was going on in his home, and I don't know how many kids would have that kind of self-discipline. But as you can appreciate, those kinds of moments are.
One way that we head into those moments is to make sure that there is a way to get these kids talking about themselves. For all of us, we struggle to talk about themselves, especially for these kids who are there with their teacher and their parents, and this may be a little bit intimidating for them. We try to get them to do some sort of a special project where they talk about themselves. Some levels, they have to write a letter to their parents. Our 7th grade level, they have to write a Thanksgiving or a Thanksgiving letter. How do they live out their thanks in their daily life? What do they want to thank their parents for? At 8th grade, kind of the culmination of this whole process is a poster, an I am poster, and you can see some of those sitting there. In the years I've been here, they have evolved and gotten bigger and grander in a lot of ways. We've had some that were shaped. For example, we had one that was a basketball backboard, and that person who loved basketball had everything about themselves on that basketball backboard. But these are as individual as the students are. We have some guidelines for those. Those are available for you. Those I am guidelines are available for you down in the bottom right. But probably the most important part of that is to get the student thinking about who they are, what they want to accomplish in life. And the centerpiece of this whole thing is an I am poem. It's scripted. There are 3 stanzas to it. That is available for you as well. But there are things like I am and some special characteristics. I wonder, I hear, I see, I want. This becomes the place where parents spend a lot of time. We used to keep these in our classrooms so there'd be something to do if you ran out of time. But running out of time or running out of things to share is never an issue. We've since moved them to the hallway, or this past year into our science lab, which wasn't being used, because we found that parents didn't have enough time. This is an opportunity for them not to only get to know their own child, but also to get to know the children with whom their kid spends the day every day. So these become really the focal point. We then save those so that those can be used again. They become the main decoration at our 8th grade graduation, and then those kids take those home. I know my son still has his I Am poster in his bedroom at home, and he's in his sophomore year of high school now. Again, we're after getting these kids to take ownership of what they do. And this is a great, great way to do that. If you're interested in doing it, I loved Mary's suggestion as far as starting small. This is the way we started it in Ann Arbor, although I won't say it was necessarily with a rock star teacher. I brought it there, but it worked very, very well for us. Plan what you're going to do, work that plan, and more than anything else, practice, practice, practice before you do this. One of the most fun things is to get to role play. And we do this with our kids too. As we're preparing for these conferences, we have them role play. I'll often take the role of a parent in their role play. Or sometimes I'll even take the role of a child, and that's a fun thing to do, often very humorous, but that training makes it much more viable option to do. Question, what does student-led conferencing look like in kindergarten or first grade? Here at our Redeemer, we don't do that. We still keep that as a parent-teacher conference because those kids haven't yet developed that ability to really look at themselves, and we're still trying to get to know them.
I should probably add here, probably the biggest resistant is the controlling parent, the person who really wants to be in charge, has a thing or two to tell that teacher. Parents are always invited to make another appointment. We will not send their student out into the hall to discuss their issues that same day, because quite honestly, we've defeated our entire purpose if we do that. It's the student's day to shine, or to take ownership and responsibility, or perhaps in a few cases it's been a come to Jesus meeting. But I will tell you, I have had more tears, and they've been mainly tears of joy in these conferences, because parents see their kids up, they see them taking responsibility, and just watching them in a professional atmosphere is a whole new insight for parents that becomes extremely emotional. So have a box of Kleenex handy if that's something you do.
The I Am activities, they vary at different grade levels. The I Am poster itself is simply an 8th grade project. As far as time required, it is very time consuming to do this. But again, we're trying to prepare kids for things that they'll do in the future as well. Those I Am activities generally end up being activities that can be used as part of the language arts curriculum. So we kind of tie those writing things into what we see and what we expect of them. As you go through this, start small, think big. As we've said over and over again, expect that pushback. It is a change. We do offer the opportunity for parents to schedule a conference with us individually after this conference if they still feel the need to do so. But as far as parent-teacher conferences go, one of the things that I have found is if I really need to talk to the parent, I've probably already done this before we get to the time of the parent-teacher conference anyway. Down at the bottom it says refresh and retool the process yearly for the first 3 years. Let me add and beyond. This is something that's a continually evolving process as we continue to try to make ourselves better.
Any questions about this specifically? And we would always welcome offline conversations as well. The interesting part, I think, of starting this initially way back when was the very fact that because I was in the middle of a master's, I needed the empirical evidence, and we literally created the percentages and the numbers, and we shared those with our parents. They were overwhelmingly positive. Terry could correct me if I'm wrong. I want to say we were at a 97% coalescence to the fact that this was the best thing they'd ever seen. And we didn't expect that in the first year. It always takes feathering new families in, and I do that already when I meet with them prior to their choosing our school. But again, it's purported as a positive because your children have a voice in their own education. You're going to get to hear them talk about those things that they find important, those things that have been enlightening to them, and maybe some ways that you personally can help them. I think sometimes kids feel safer than you might ever expect because teachers promise them, I'm not going to hang you out to dry. This is a way that you and I can talk to mom or dad and get their buy-in as well. So kids see the teacher as an advocate. The first couple of years they came in shaking and they left smiling. Now they come in kind of pumped for it all, and I'm told in some families are even fighting for who gets to go first. Maybe they want to get it over with. There's always that possibility. But more importantly, they know that they're going to leave there feeling like they've really accomplished something. So that's pretty huge.
Mary,
We're going to move on quickly since time is...
just a question. How do you deal with teachers who are resistant to going into this?
I think that over the course of time, the biggest thing we've done differently than maybe where we started, because you have to start with the people, obviously, who are working with you. We've been looking for this collegiality, the willingness to communicate, the willingness to be open in the people that we hire. But for those people who were going to resist, we really had to have some private conversations. And basically, especially after the first 3 years, Terry will remember this, basically we had to start saying this is the way that we do business, much in the same way that you would tell parents that you have to be on board, you're on the bus, or the bus is leaving without you. That's a tough conversation. It wouldn't be the sole purpose on which to get rid of a teacher, obviously, but what we purport privately and discuss and maybe haggle over or co-plan to make them as successful as possible, that's private. And when it gets to be public, where they're dealing with the public, they will be behind this in everything that they say 100%. And were that not to happen, I've not had that conversation, never had that issue, but we would definitely be having a real serious conversation because I'm trying to make you look good, remember, and we. So when we make this decision corporately, we really ask you to go with it. Does that help? Okay, then next we're going to take a look at noting data trends. This is a short conversation. This idea actually came to me when I opened the Wauwatosa Now paper one day about 6 years ago, and they were having something they called Data Day. It's mainly a day where teachers were given some free time to huddle, if you will, and to make the best decisions possible about where their conversation with students and their instructions would be for the future. Where does their instruction need to go? What is this group doing well? What are they not doing so well? So that we can truly drive instruction. In fact, after we looked at 2 years of data trends, one thing we said to ourselves was we're testing at the wrong time of year. So that being said, we moved our testing to November instead because we wanted to be able to take those trends and apply them to everything that happened in the future. That's huge, especially from the fact that that too was a paradigm shift. We've done some shifting and people around here kind of expect change a good share of the time, but it's been great for parents because these results are returned to us by Christmas vacation generally, and then they go home in the second semester or the first semester report card. By that time, our teachers have huddled and they have made the decisions they feel are necessary, both for children as individuals. 2 heads are better than one. They look at those results. They say, this is where we need to really work with Jimmy or Johnny or Susie to try to bring them to the next level. Questions that teachers will address are some of these that you see on the screen. And as we clip through these quickly, understand they'll be up on the portal so you can go back. But what I do in my world is I hire 2 subs for the day. They work from 8 to 10:30 in one classroom, and this year our 6th grade teachers went out for coffee, took their computer, and looked at all those scores, made some decisions. They'll come back to our faculty also, by the way, and share at a faculty meeting what they see the trends to be. Usually math computation is going to be a hot spot, but there are a lot of other things that we need to tend to, and so they can share. This is what we found were the strengths and the weaknesses, both at our grade level and for our individual students. The other thing that I found quite helpful is teachers are totally prepared when parents come at them with questions regarding anything they see as those results. So 6th grade teachers were out for 2.5 hours. 4th grade teachers went for lunch, did the very same thing. And 2nd grade teachers took off at the end of the day beginning at 1 o'clock and did again, this time where they could put their heads together. It costs us 2 subs. It costs me some time in the classroom, which I absolutely love. And it's given them the opportunity. They kind of see it as a perk, but really we're accomplishing so much by using this process. So it's just something that I would strongly encourage you to consider a day aside. The monetary value really can't be measured. And every year is a new year because we have new personalities, new needs, new talents, and we need to definitely tailor our instruction to what those needs might be. Finally, Jim's going to finish up with team time here quickly, and I think these are the 2 easiest conversations to have. So hopefully we can finish the time.
And this is not necessarily something that's brand new. It's something that probably most schools do in one way, shape, or form, but it's important to know that an administrator can't do things all on their own and can't know everything that's going on in every level, especially in those larger schools. This team time, these department meetings, are something that are very important to us. They are set aside each month. We know exactly when they're going to be, and we're required as much as possible to be there. The most important thing here, and you'll hear us say this again and again, it's about relationships. It's this honest and open dialogue that there's acceptance between the teachers. And one of the things that I've noted is that our junior high department meetings are very different from the department meetings that my wife goes through at the 3rd grade level. Ours tend to be more kind of in your face, but that's because of the people that we have there. We can be honest, we can be open, we can be passionate, and that's okay. One of the things that we do make sure we do in the intentionality of this is ask some questions. Are we really doing what it is that we want to do on these teams? So each year, at the end of the year, as part of the evaluation process, these questions are asked. We assess the health of the team. In fact, this year we're doing that really as we speak. So there are on your screen some questions that we ask the team, and we bring those 2 team members in together, or those several team members in together with the principal to talk about what it is that we're doing. Is this happening in your group? We want to be extremely intentional with what it is that we do. So as we look at our people and we look at evaluating this, we want to ask ourselves, are our departments achieving the purposes for which they were contrived? Are we really working together to make sure that we're getting the best out of our coworkers? Are we cooperating? And are we making sure that we're focusing also on our students as well? This can be a time for communication. This can be a time for cooperation. This can be a time for celebration. Our principal always has things that we need to accomplish there as well, and that's the time that we can do that in a smaller group where more people can be heard than necessarily at a larger faculty meeting.
I would surely want to note here that team time can be also very unveiling. Teachers, when I bring in 2 2nd grade teachers, we sit down and do this evaluation, or 2 5th grade teachers, I get a pretty good sense how well they work together. Some have brought it in where they've actually completed it together. Others have brought in those 2 pieces of paper and breasted their cards, almost afraid to share. So I also ask for the paperwork that they've done on this as well. In leading others to lead, whether it's our students, our teachers, our department heads, or ourselves, none of us is ever where God wants us to be. We've always got tons of improvement that can be made along the way. As principals, we know we deal with fiscal responsibility, the assurance of quality, the information retention that we need to make prudent decisions. It can be pretty overwhelming at times. And what we're hoping today is that we've showed you that the bottom line is really about the depth that you're willing to take, the collegiality you're willing to foster, and then the challenges you're willing to take on, that you're really pushing the envelope, not because it's comfortable. Nothing about what we've shared with you today has been extremely comfortable as we grew, but we've certainly reached a point where, by the grace of God and awesome people like Jim Van Dellen and the others that I work with, we've created a team that honestly can say to one another at the end of the year, we've done well. Gail asked, how often do departments meet together? We do a 2nd Tuesday of the month faculty meeting, a 4th Tuesday of the month department meeting. And that's a no excuses deal, Gail. They definitely will be there. Sometimes we're doing things that the whole school needs to do, working on curriculum and planning, for example. Sometimes it's very department oriented, whether it's a Christmas program. They will always have, over the course of the quarter, and I have department heads that I meet with first to kind of structure the meetings, they will have certain things they need to accomplish, certain professional articles that they'll read and discuss in their department meeting. But sometimes musicals happen, and we need to talk about things like that as well. So the quotes that you have on the screen, I think, are good ones to leave you with. We want to thank you for sharing with us this afternoon or this morning, and just remember that planned, pattern, patient, persistent, and prayer are those things that are going to make your school even better than I'm sure it is right now. Thanks so much for your time, and Terry and Perry, thank you so much for arranging our time with everyone today.
Thank you,
God
Mary,
bless.
and thank
And
you,
I should
Jim.
throw in,
Mary, and thank you, Jim, for a great webinar.
Terry, I should throw in, Terry, I should just throw in that I just got a message texted from Milwaukee Public Schools. They closed. So I think we're out for tomorrow. They've already canceled that as well, and Jim and I are both smiling.
Yes.
Next week, the final webinar sponsored by NLSA will take place on Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. It will be presented by the leader and teachers of St. John in Orange, California. So tune in then, and they'll be sharing their great best practices. Remember, these were low or no cost solutions for professional development. A great webinar. Thank you, Mary and Jim.